Today is June 28th, 2026, and the June 26th source. This analysis is about to examine is analytically distinct from the post-strike June 27th coverage already produced because it documents the real-time picture from before the American strike packages departed, the 18-hour IRGC northern route demand, the ever-lovely attack's specific sequence, and the diplomatic and military simultaneity whose precise timing reveals the civilian IRGC authority gap in the most concrete form this conflict has yet produced. The pre-strike picture adds specific new elements to the post-strike analysis. An intelligence assessment of IRGC revenue motivation cited to a named institutional source. A new counter-drone platform this analysis has not previously examined. A capability update that revises the June 22nd air stack coverage, and a strategic doctrine statement about a second maritime choke point that describes an ambition this analysis has not yet characterized in full. Let's back all the way up. Because to understand why the IRGC's June 25th northern route only demand, issued 18 hours before the ever-lovely attack, was the operational setup for the attack, rather than an independent warning, why the moment Araghchi's phone call with Oman's foreign minister about Strait administration, and the moment an IRGC drone found the ever-lovely on the Omani corridor were simultaneous was not coincidental, but structurally revelatory. Why the International Maritime Organization's halt of all rescue and evacuation operations for stranded vessels, potentially affecting 11,000 seafarers, is the humanitarian consequence of the targeting doctrine. This analysis documented in the June 27th post-strike script. Why the Electronic Advanced Ground Launcher System is the counter-drone platform this analysis has not previously examined, despite its deployment in theater and its specific economic advantage over every other intercept option. Why the GBU-54 laser JDAM on the F-16's wing being aimed at IRGC drone operators and command nodes rather than the drones themselves represents a targeting escalation from kinetic effect to command authority degradation. Why the JP Morgan $98 billion annual estimate of IRGC revenue from full Hormuz control provides a named institutional basis for the motive this analysis has described as the gatekeeper framing throughout this session, and why the IRGC's simultaneous declaration of intent to extend Strait authority to the Bab al-Mandab, the southern entrance to the Red Sea, constitutes a doctrinal statement about controlling both ends of the Arabian Peninsula's maritime commerce rather than a single choke point. You need to hold the entire pre-strike picture simultaneously alongside the post-strike developments the June 27th script has already established. Here's the picture as it stood on June 26, 2026, the day before today's anchor, before the strike package is executed, and why nearly every element of it provides context the post-strike coverage needed that could only come from the real-time perspective before those strikes resolve the immediate tactical situation. On June 25th, approximately 18 hours before the ever-lovely was struck, the IRGC issued a blunt directive to all shipping vessels requiring them to coordinate with Iranian naval authorities and use only the northern route through the strait, the route that positions vessels close to Iranian coastal launch facilities for fast attack craft and drone operations, rather than the American-protected Omani corridor that hugs the southern coast. This directive was not a legal notice under any recognized maritime law. It was an operational demand stating the IRGC's intent to treat the Omani corridor as unauthorized and vessels using it as operating at their own risk. On June 26th, the ever-lovely, a Singapore-flagged cargo vessel using the American-protected southern Omani route, was struck by one of 4 IRGC drones. The drone hit the bridge of the vessel, the specific command and navigation location through which the crew operates the ship. 3 of the 4 drones were shot down before reaching their target. The ship sustained damage but was able to proceed on its way, as Trump's Truth Social post confirmed in specific operational language. One of those drones solidly hit the upper deck of a large and very expensive cargo-carrying ship. Damage was done, but the ship was able to proceed on its way. We knocked down 3 other drones. Secretary of State Rubio and Vice President Vance were simultaneously engaged in diplomatic efforts to give Iran the opportunity to maintain the ceasefire framework. At almost the exact same moment the ever-lovely's bridge absorbed the drone impact, Iran's foreign minister Araghchi was on a call with Oman's foreign minister discussing the future administration of the Strait of Hormuz. The UKMTO, United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations, confirmed the strike. The International Maritime Organization, which had been coordinating rescue and evacuation operations for commercial vessels stranded in the Gulf, immediately halted all such operations following the attack. Approximately 11,000 seafarers could still be trapped in the Gulf, unable to proceed. CENTCOM's response was not a press conference or a strongly worded diplomatic statement. It was the public release of images showing F-16 Block 50 aircraft on patrol carrying APKWS laser-guided rockets and the GBU-54 laser JDAM. The Electronic Advanced Ground Launcher System, The EAGLS, a remotely operated counter-drone platform firing APKWS rockets guided by AESA radar and electro-optical infrared sensors, had been deployed to the theater. Reports indicated the A-10 Warthog had largely departed the region, with the F-16 Block 50 and Block 52 now serving as the primary strike aircraft in theater. The J.P. Morgan Institution had estimated that full IRGC control of the Strait of Hormuz could generate approximately $90 billion per year in revenue. An IRGC commander was simultaneously discussing using Bab al-Mandab, the southern Red Sea entrance, the other end of the Arabian Peninsula's maritime commerce arc, as a second choke point whose authority the IRGC seeks to establish alongside Hormuz. In Ukraine, drones struck the Orenburg gas processing plant at over 700 miles range, alongside other strategic targets. Russia reported intercepting over 600 Ukrainian drones, and Ukrainian military leadership described a 40-plus day extended offensive campaign. That is the complete June 26th real-time picture. Now let's take it apart, layer by layer, focusing on the elements the post-strike June 27th coverage left unexamined. The 18-hour northern route only demand is the analytical starting point, because its timing in relation to the ever-lovely attack transforms the attack from an unpredictable escalation into an announced operational intention whose 18-hour lead time made it foreseeable. The IRGC issued the northern route directive on June 25th. 18 hours later, an IRGC drone found an ever-lovely on the Omani corridor and struck its bridge. The operational logic of the sequence is not complex. The northern route demand established the IRGC's claimed authority to designate authorized routes. The attack on a vessel using the unauthorized route 18 hours later enforced that claim with kinetic action. The sequence is the toll booth doctrine from April expressed in compressed form. Declare the authority, demonstrate the enforcement. The 18-hour gap between declaration and enforcement suggests the attack was not a spontaneous tactical decision, but a planned demonstration of the declaration's seriousness, issued publicly enough in advance to be heard and ignored before being acted upon. A declaration issued the previous day and then enforced against the first available vessel on the prohibited route is the operational expression of the targeting doctrine as a deterrent rather than as a coercive one-time action. Now let's get into the Aragchi-Oman call timing, because this is the most precise single illustration of the civilian versus IRGC authority gap in the entire June 26th reporting. At almost the exact same moment an IRGC drone struck the Ever-Lovely's bridge, Iran's foreign minister was on a telephone call with Oman's foreign minister discussing the future administration of the Strait of Hormuz. The civilian diplomatic track was engaged in a conversation about how the strait would be managed going forward. The military command track was simultaneously managing the strait by striking a vessel on the route whose administration was being discussed. These two activities were occurring in the same institutional moment, conducted by different components of the Iranian state apparatus in direct operational contradiction. The foreign minister discussing future administration of the strait cannot have authorized the drone strike on the Ever-Lovely during the same call, because the authorization for a strike on a specific vessel in a specific corridor at a specific moment does not flow through diplomatic channels. The IRGC's operational command authorized the strike. The foreign ministry's diplomatic channel was engaged elsewhere. The result is the specific version of the civilian IRGC authority gap that this analysis has documented across its entire session. Not merely that civilian and military decision-making proceed in parallel without coordination, but that military action can occur during this specific moment of civilian diplomatic engagement on the exact same subject the military action is disrupting. The Aragchi-Oman call's subject, future administration of the strait, is itself analytically significant. Aragchi, discussing future administration of the Hormuz corridor with the Omani foreign minister, is the civilian diplomatic track attempting to establish a legitimate governance framework for the waterway, potentially the Gulf Strait Authority, or similar institutional structure that the IRGC's own statement describes as the alternative to American corridor control. The Omani foreign minister's engagement on this topic reflects Oman's long-standing mediating role in U.S.-Iran relationships, and its geographic position as the coastal nation on the southern side of the corridor, whose agreement with any maritime governance framework would be operationally necessary for that framework to function. The simultaneous drone attack on the Omani corridor during this call disrupts not just the American protected transit, but the diplomatic foundation of the conversation Aragchi was engaged in, making the IRGC's military command the specific impediment to the civilian diplomatic track's progress on the exact question that the military action concerned. Now let's get into the EGLS, the Electronic Advanced Ground Launcher System, because this is genuinely new capability in this analysis's coverage, and its specific characteristics deserve full examination. The EAGLS is a remotely operated counter-drone platform deployed to naval vessels in the theater that fires APKWS laser-guided rockets, guided by an AESA radar, an electro-optical infrared sensor combination. Its engagement cost per drone is approximately $20,000, the same APKWS per round cost this analysis has documented in detail in the June 6th Orbit 30 engagement script. The EAGLS's specific operational advantage over other counter-drone options is that it operates from the deck of a ship, remotely controlled, without requiring a pilot or a ground-based crew exposed to the threat environment. It extends the APKWS's cost parity economics from the manned aircraft platform, where the pilot and aircraft represent a significant additional cost in risk and operating expense, to a platform whose loss, in a worst-case scenario, is a rack of APKWS rounds and the launcher system rather than an aircraft and a crew. The AESA radar guidance complements the electro-optical infrared sensor's thermal tracking, the same dual-mode approach this analysis documented in the Helios and radar versus Odin in thermal comparison, providing both radar detection at range and thermal track and terminal engagement. An IRGC shod drone entering the engagement envelope of an EAGLS-equipped destroyer is simultaneously visible to the AESA radar and trackable by the EO-IR sensor, regardless of which detection modality the drone was designed to defeat. The EAGLS adds a fourth distinct layer to the counter-drone architecture this analysis has documented. Helios and Odin as directed energy aboard USS Prebley and other equipped destroyers, APKWS from manned F-15E and F-16 aircraft, APKWS from AH-64 Apache helicopters, and now EAGLS from ship decks as an autonomous, remotely operated ground launch option. Each layer addresses a slightly different engagement geometry and threat profile, and their combined coverage substantially reduces the gaps in the intercept envelope that a purely single-mode counter-drone architecture would leave. A Shahed drone approaching from a direction where no helicopter is available, at an altitude below the F-16's optimal APKWS engagement geometry, in conditions where the directed energy system's atmospheric attenuation limits its effective range, remains addressable by the EAGLS on the destroyer's deck, whose remotely operated launcher can engage across a wider range of approach angles than any single platform counter-drone system. Now let's get into the GBU-54 laser JDAM on the F-16's wing, because this weapon's specific presence on the platform alongside the APKWS represents a targeting escalation from intercepting drones to targeting the human and infrastructure elements of the IRGC's drone operation. The APKWS rocket is the drone intercept weapon. Engage the drone before it reaches its target. The GBU-54 is a laser-guided joint direct attack munition capable of striking hardened structures with precision sufficient to destroy a command node or an operator facility. Carrying both on the same F-16 and the same patrol sortie means the aircraft is simultaneously equipped to intercept drones in flight and to strike the operators directing those drones, the command and control nodes coordinating drone operations, and the storage facilities where additional drones are held for subsequent launches. This is the same dual-mission logic this analysis documented in the May 7th coverage. The strike package addresses both the immediate threat category and the enabling infrastructure that produces future threats. An F-16 loitering over the southern corridor with APKWS for drone intercept, and GBU-54 for C-2 strikes communicates to every IRGC operator at an island launch facility that the aircraft circling overhead is simultaneously the instrument that will shoot their drone down and the instrument that will strike their position if their drone launches. This is the specific deterrent communication CENTCOM's image release was designed to make explicit, not an airstrike in progress, but a public display of the loadout that makes attacking commercial vessels cost the IRGC both the drone and the operator who launched it. Now let's get into the A-10 Warthog's departure from the theater, because this is an update to the June 22nd military leverage script that featured the A-10's confirmed role and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs' endorsement of its performance in maritime interdiction. The A-10 has largely departed the theater as of June 26th, with the F-16 Block 50 and Block 52 described as the primary strike aircraft in theater going forward. The F-16's specific advantages over the A-10 for the current mission set include higher speed, enabling faster transit between the carrier and the engagement zone, supersonic capability, making the aircraft harder to engage with man-portable air defense systems, a harm-carrying capability for radar suppression missions that the A-10 cannot perform, and the dual APKWS and GBU-54 loadout that provides both drone intercept and precision strike in a single platform rather than requiring separate aircraft for each mission. The A-10's advantages: Extended low-altitude loiter time, survivability under small arms fire, and the specific intimidation effect of the GAU-8 cannon on small surface contacts were most relevant during the hot phase of combat operations, when fast attack boat encounters were frequent and the threat environment's specific character favored a platform that could absorb hits and keep operating. As the engagement environment evolves toward a mix of drone intercept and C2 targeting that rewards speed, precision, and electronic warfare integration more than survivability and loiter time, the F-16 Block 5052's capabilities become the better fit for the current mission set. Now let's get into the AH-64 Apache and its longbow configuration specifically, because this variant's specific capability for the current mission set deserves more analytical depth than it has received in prior coverage, and the June 26th reporting provides that depth. The AH-64 Apache, equipped with the AN/APG-78 longbow fire control radar, can simultaneously detect, classify, and prioritize up to 256 contacts while engaging 16 of the highest priority targets before exposing the rotor head above a ridge or flight deck. Against small, low-altitude, slow-moving one-way attack drones, exactly the Shahed profile that has been the primary threat category in the southern corridor, the longbow's ability to classify contacts by their flight profile, acoustic signature, and radar return distinguishes between commercial vessels, maritime patrol aircraft, drones, and fast attack boats before any kinetic decision is made. The Apache's AGM-114 Hellfire missile variants provide the engagement capability against both the drone category and the fast attack boat category from a single platform, a drone hunter that simultaneously remains the most effective weapon against the IRGC's fast attack boat fleet if that threat category reemerges. The Apache's vulnerability in this environment is the reverse of what the longbow's detection capability addresses. It operates at altitudes that bring it within the engagement range of drones attempting to target the helicopter itself, requiring the Apache crew to maintain constant situational awareness about incoming threats while executing engagements. The EAGLS's ship deck deployment partially addresses this vulnerability by providing an alternative counter-drone option that does not expose a helicopter crew to the threat environment, giving commanders the choice between manned platform engagement geometry and unmanned platform engagement economics based on the specific tactical situation. Now let's get into the 100 to plus ships per week throughput figure, because this provides a weekly aggregate that contextualizes the daily figures this analysis has been working with. Over 100 commercial vessels transited the Omani corridor in the week preceding the June 26th reporting. The Ever-Lovely was one of them. The fact that a drone found one vessel out of more than 100 attempting transit in the same week does not reduce the analytical significance of the attack. A drone that finds one vessel in 100 demonstrates the same targeting capability and the same willingness to employ it as a drone that finds 10. But the weekly transit figure does establish that the corridor is operationally functioning at a meaningful volume despite the elevated threat environment. More than 100 ships in a week means more than 14 per day on average, consistent with but distinct from the 55 ships in 24 hours figure CENTCOM has confirmed for peak days. The weekly aggregate makes the corridor's commercial function visible at a different analytical scale than the daily count, establishing that the disruption the IRGC is capable of producing is selective rather than comprehensive. The corridor is functioning, and the IRGC is targeting specific vessels that can be identified and reached, rather than blocking the corridor wholesale. This selectivity is itself part of the doctrine this analysis has been examining. A wholesale corridor blockade that stops all 100 weekly ships triggers immediate maximum American military response. A selective targeting approach that strikes one or two vessels per week, while the other 99 proceed, imposes continuous elevated risk on all vessels while avoiding the single dramatic threshold crossing act that would trigger an unambiguous escalation response. The IRGC's selective targeting is not incompetence. It is the specific approach that maximizes pressure without crossing the line that converts a contested normalcy dynamic into an outright second round of the conflict. The Ever-Lovely's bridge took the hit. The other 99-plus ships that week did not. Both facts are the doctrine in practice. Now let's get into the IMO halt and the 11,000 seafarers, because this is the humanitarian dimension of the June 26th. Reporting that most directly illustrates the cost the targeting doctrine imposes on individuals with no stake in the geopolitical dispute. The International Maritime Organization was coordinating rescue and evacuation operations for commercial vessels stranded in the Gulf, vessels that had been unable to proceed following prior disruptions and were waiting for safe transit windows, with crews aboard in conditions whose duration and uncertainty were becoming a distinct humanitarian problem independent of the military and diplomatic questions the ceasefire was designed to address. When the Ever-Lovely was struck, the IMO halted all rescue and evacuation operations immediately. An estimated 11,000 seafarers may be affected by that halt. crew members on vessels that cannot proceed, cannot safely evacuate, and cannot receive coordinated assistance from the International Maritime Safety Organization, whose entire function is managing exactly this kind of situation. These are workers from shipping nations whose governments have no role in the U.S.-Iran dispute, and who are aboard vessels whose cargo, route, and timing decisions were made by commercial operators following guidance that the U.S.-approved corridor was the safe option. The IRGC's targeting doctrine's assertion that consequences of using unauthorized routes fall on the vessel's owner, operator, and commander does not distinguish between the commercial decision-maker who chose the route and the crew whose safety depends on a route they did not personally select. 11,000 seafarers waiting in the Gulf are the specific human population bearing the cost of that doctrine's non-distinction. J.P. Morgan assessed that Iran could generate over $90 billion per year if it fully controlled the Strait of Hormuz, presumably through toll collection on the roughly 20 million barrels of oil per day that transit the corridor under normal conditions, at a toll rate that would represent a small percentage of the commodity value passing through the waterway daily. The specific arithmetic behind the $90 billion figure would require assumptions about toll rates and compliance levels that this analysis cannot fully reconstruct from the available reporting. But the magnitude is consistent with the gatekeeper framing this analysis established early in this session. Iran's primary strategic interest in this conflict is not the nuclear program, not the proxy network, not the surface fleet that no longer exists, but the Hormuz toll collection mechanism that would generate sovereign revenue at a scale that dwarfs any other income source available to the current regime. The $90 billion figure, compared to the current $500 million per day in blockade-imposed revenue denial, explains the regime's willingness to absorb that denial rather than accept terms that permanently foreclose the toll authority. At $90 billion per year in potential revenue, the opportunity cost of a single year's blockade denial is less than 2 months of the potential toll revenue. The math of what the IRGC is holding out for, in revenue terms, makes the institutional behavior this analysis has documented as irrational in military terms, entirely rational in financial terms. Now, let's get into the Bab al-Mandab dual choke point doctrine, because this is the single most strategically significant new element in the June 26th real-time reporting that the June 27th post-strike script did not examine. The IRGC's stated ambition to extend its strait authority to the Bab al-Mandab, the southern entrance to the Red Sea at the other end of the Arabian Peninsula, is not a new development in the abstract. The Houthis Red Sea campaign, documented in this analysis's earlier coverage as evidence of Iran's proxy network and operational deployment, has been disrupting Red Sea shipping since 2023. But the explicit framing of Bab al-Mandab authority as the complement to Hormuz authority, creating a stated doctrine of controlling global maritime commerce from both ends of the Arabian Peninsula simultaneously, moves from proxy harassment to a formal sovereignty claim over 2 international waterways whose combined control would give Iran, or Iranian-aligned forces, the ability to impose costs on virtually all maritime energy commerce flowing to or from Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. The J.P. Morgan $90 billion Hormuz figure would be compounded by Bab al-Mandab toll authority in an IRGC doctrine that describes both ends of the peninsula as legitimate enforcement zones for an Iranian maritime authority that no internationally recognized legal framework supports. This doctrinal ambition, stated explicitly by IRGC sources in the June 26th reporting, is the context in which Graham's "we are going to run it" declaration and the Omani corridor expansion carry their most consequential meaning. They are American responses not to a tactical dispute over drone attacks on commercial vessels, but to a strategic assertion about sovereign maritime governance that, if accepted, would represent the most consequential territorial authority claim by any non-globally dominant power since the Second World War. Now let's get into the Ukraine-Orenburg strike, because the 700-plus mile range drone reaching a gas processing plant deep inside Russian territory is the clearest demonstration yet that the counter-drone lessons being generated in the Strait of Hormuz are already being applied in the other theater, where shared technology lineage connects the same weapons through the Iran-Russia-China diffusion network this analysis has documented. The Orenburg gas processing plant strike represents Ukrainian drone range extension to targets that were previously beyond operational reach, 700 miles from Ukrainian territory into Russia's Urals region, the same Shahed lineage one-way attack drone concept applied in the reverse direction by the country that has been receiving Shahed attacks for the longest period, with a technology refinement that extends the effective reach beyond anything the original Shahed design contemplated. Russia reported intercepting over 600 Ukrainian drones in the same period, a drone saturation counter-campaign at a scale that dwarfs anything the Strait of Hormuz has produced in any single engagement window. Ukraine's 40-plus day extended offensive campaign is the Ukraine analog of what this analysis has described as the Iran conflict's compounding pressure dynamic, Not a decisive, single engagement, but a sustained attrition campaign designed to achieve, through accumulated cost, what no individual action can produce. Both theaters are simultaneously demonstrating, through active operations, the limits and capabilities of drone saturation as an offensive strategy and counter-drone architecture as a defensive response. Data, the analysis of either theater, can usefully apply to the other. Now let's bring all the threads together, because the northern route demand as 18-hour setup, the Aragchi-Oman timing as civilian IRGC simultaneity demonstration, the EAGLS as new counter-drone capability, the GBU-54 as operator targeting escalation, the F-16 Block 5052 as primary platform replacing the A-10, the JP Morgan 90B figure as name source motive evidence, the Bab al-Mandeb dual choke point doctrine as the strategic ambition behind the tactical harassment, and the Ukrainian Orenburg drone strike as cross-theater technology application converge on a picture that complements and deepens what the post-strike analysis already established. The setup track has the 18-hour northern route demand as evidence that the ever-lovely attack was an announced enforcement action rather than an impulsive tactical decision. The IRGC declared the doctrine and then executed it within 18 hours against the first available vessel. The simultaneity track has the Aragchi-Oman call as the precise moment of civilian IRGC coordination failure, occurring not as a historical pattern to be inferred from disparate events, but as a concrete, simultaneous occurrence documented in real time. The capability track has the EAGLS as the counter-drone option this analysis had not previously examined, extending APKWS economics from manned aircraft to remotely operated ship deck launchers, and adding a fourth distinct layer to the intercept architecture. The targeting escalation track has the GBU-54 laser JDAM as the instrument that transforms the F-16 from a drone intercept platform into a combined drone and operator targeting package on the same sortie. The platform update track has the FM-16 Block 5052, now serving as the primary strike aircraft with the A-10, having largely departed, updating the June 22nd air stack analysis. The motive track has the JP Morgan $90 billion figure as named institutional confirmation that the financial stakes of Hormuz Authority are large enough to explain the IRGC's willingness to absorb the conflict's costs, rather than accept terms that permanently foreclose toll collection. The doctrine track has the Bab al-Mandeb dual choke point ambition as the full strategic picture behind what appears as tactical harassment, a stated intent to establish Iranian-aligned maritime authority over both major choke points surrounding the Arabian Peninsula. Here's the honest assessment of what the June 26th pre-strike real-time picture adds to the post-strike analysis already produced. The post-strike analysis established the ever-lovely attack as the trigger for proportional American strikes, and the Bahrain 5th Fleet headquarters drone attack as the IRGC's escalation to targeting American command infrastructure. The pre-strike picture adds the operational context that transforms both events from reactive escalation responses into planned elements of a doctrinal campaign. The 18-hour demand as the setup, the attack as the enforcement, the Bahrain strike as the retaliation for the response to the enforcement, and the Bab al-Mandeb doctrine statement as the strategic framework that makes all of these individual events expressions of a single sustained assertion about who exercises authority over maritime commerce in and around the Arabian Peninsula. Both the pre-strike and post-strike pictures agree that the deconfliction hotline's non-use before the ever-lovely attack, the specific mechanism the roadmap established for exactly this kind of dispute, is the most operationally telling detail in the entire June 26th sequence. The hotline exists. Aragchi was on the phone with Oman at the moment of the attack. The IRGC launched the drone without anyone picking up the line that was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of incident. The civilian IRGC authority gap that this analysis has documented from the April 8th ceasefire's immediate violation through today has now found its most concentrated single expression. The same institutional gap, the same moment, the same phone that wasn't called, and the same drone that found the ever-lovely bridge anyway. The pre-strike picture also adds the specific detail that makes the post-strike response's restraint more analytically comprehensible. The American response to the ever-lovely attack was the June 26th strike packages at Sirik Jaskmanab Keshem Bandar Abbas, proportional, targeted at enabling infrastructure, explicitly not directed at the nuclear program or senior command leadership. That restraint, examined in isolation in the post-strike script, appears as a calibrated enforcement measure maintaining the roadmap. Examined in the context of the pre-strike picture, the Bab al-Mandeb doctrine statement, the JP Morgan $90 billion figure's confirmation of what's actually at stake, the IRGC's willingness to strike a vessel, while the civilian foreign minister was simultaneously discussing maritime governance with Oman. The restraint appears less as strategic confidence and more as a recognition that the full target list would formally end the roadmap that Washington is still attempting to preserve. The $90 billion in potential IRGC revenue is what makes the roadmap the prize. The drone that found the Ever Lovely is what makes it the test. The F-16 with APKWS and GBU-54 is what makes both the drone and the operator who launched it understand that the test has a grader, and the grader is not interested in receiving the wrong answer twice from the same location.